My sister said, "Send me $3,000 to rent an apartment." I replied, "Get a job." That simple response set off a storm I had long anticipated. I have always been the responsible one in our family. From childhood, it was clear that Brielle, my younger sister, would always come first. Birthday presents, school achievements, family vacations. Everything seemed to revolve around her. Meanwhile, my accomplishments were met with a polite, almost dismissive, "That's what we expect from you." No celebration, no pride. Just an expectation that I would always provide and manage my life perfectly while Brielle coasted along. I worked tirelessly for years to build a stable life. I saved every dollar I could, rented a small condo, and slowly made a home for myself. Brielle, on the other hand, seemed to float through life without effort. Whenever she needed something, she would turn to me, treating my bank account like it existed solely for her benefit. I helped with school fees, car repairs, rent, vacations, anything she demanded. And every time, my parents applauded her resourcefulness while shrugging off my hard work as normal. The final straw came in the form of a text. Brielle needed $3,000 for an apartment deposit. My first instinct was exhaustion, not anger. How many times had I bailed her out? How many sacrifices had I made while she treated money as a limitless resource? I typed a reply that surprised even me. "Get a job." Almost immediately, my phone rang. It was my parents. But instead of concern, they lashed out, their voices heavy with guilt-tripping and veiled threats. They painted me as ungrateful, heartless, and selfish. They made it clear that in their eyes, I existed to fund Brielle's lifestyle, not as a daughter with my own life, my own dreams, and my own needs. As I listened, I felt something shift inside me. The years of silent frustration, the endless giving without recognition, and the constant favoritism toward Brielle culminated in this moment of clarity. I realized I had been supporting a family that saw me as a bank rather than a person. The unfairness and the exploitation were glaringly obvious. For the first time, I felt a sense of empowerment. No longer would I allow my generosity to be taken for granted. No longer would I be expected to quietly sacrifice while Brielle and my parents lived at my expense. That single text, and my honest reply, became the turning point. It was not just about money. It was about respect, boundaries, and finally valuing myself in a family that had long undervalued me. That night, I sat on my couch, my hands trembling slightly as I stared at my laptop. The calls from my parents still echoed in my mind, full of guilt and anger, but something inside me had finally shifted. I saw everything clearly. For years, I had been giving and sacrificing, covering bills and making life easier for my family, while they barely noticed my struggles. I realized I had been supporting people who didn't care about me, and I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I made a decision that would change everything. I would no longer be the background character in their lives. I would no longer let my hard work fund their comfort while I got nothing in return. I opened my banking app and began canceling every automated payment I had set up for them. The premium cable, their phone bills, the streaming subscriptions. I ended all of it in a single evening. With each click, I felt a mix of fear and relief washing over me. It was simple, but it was mine. I was taking back control of my life. I knew the storm would come. My parents would call, complain, maybe even threaten. Brielle would probably text me 100 times, begging or yelling. But for the first time, I felt ready. I had chosen myself, and that mattered more than anything else. I double-checked every account to make sure nothing slipped through. Each step reminded me of my own worth. I had worked hard for my condo, for my savings, for the small peace I had created in my life. I couldn't let them take that from me anymore. I could feel the tension in my chest slowly ease, replaced with a quiet strength I hadn't felt in years. By the time I closed my laptop, a new calm had settled over me. It wasn't happiness exactly, but a firm determination. I had drawn a line, and I had done it on my own terms. I was finally standing up for myself. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without the weight of endless demands pressing down on me. I felt free in a way I never had before, and I knew I would never give that freedom up again. My phone started ringing nonstop the moment I finished cutting off the payments. Calls, texts, notifications, all at once. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. My mom, Cora, was the first to call. Her voice was shaking, almost crying. She kept complaining about the internet being cut off in the middle of her favorite show. I could hear the frustration in her tone, but I didn't apologize. I had done enough for years, and this time it was my turn to step back. Then my dad, Vance, called. His anger was loud and sharp. He ranted about how he couldn't pay for the new tires he had just bought, and how it was my fault he had to handle things himself. I listened quietly, letting him vent. For years, I had been the one keeping their life easy, and now they were forced to face the consequences of managing on their own. Before I could respond to them, my phone blew up with messages from Brielle. She sent dozens of texts, each one more dramatic than the last. She accused me of making her homeless, ruining her life, and destroying the family. She begged, pleaded, and even tried to guilt me, but I could feel the weight of all those years of taking care of her finally lift off my shoulders. I realized nothing she said could make me go back to being the family's ATM. I blocked her number. I knew that responding would only pull me back into old patterns I was determined to leave behind. Then I called my parents back, this time calmly. I told them I would no longer cover their bills or anyone else's. My voice was steady but firm. I explained that I had been doing it for years, and it was time I focused on myself and my future. I could hear their disbelief and anger, but I didn't let it shake me. I was done being the one everyone relied on without ever considering what I needed. For the first time, I felt a strange mix of fear and freedom. Fear because I knew they would struggle without me, and freedom because I had finally drawn the line. I could feel my own life starting to take shape in a way it never had before. The storm of calls and messages raged on, but inside I was calm. I had made a choice that was right for me, and no amount of panic, guilt, or drama could take that away. That night, I sat quietly in my condo, listening to the silence between the storms of notifications. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. For the first time, I wasn't just responding to everyone else's needs. I was taking care of myself, and it felt powerful. One evening, there was a loud knock at my door. I opened it to find my parents, Vance and Cora, standing there with furious expressions. They didn't even wait to come inside. They barged in, shouting about family duty and how ungrateful I had become. Their anger was loud and sharp, each word like a weight pressing down on me. I could feel their frustration, but I stayed calm. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. I just let them talk until they had nothing left to say. When their voices finally quieted for a moment, I reached for a notebook I had kept carefully over the years. I slid it across the table toward them. The pages were neat, each entry showing the money I had given them and Brielle over time. Every bill I had covered, every emergency I had paid for, every loan I had quietly handled. It was all there, written in detail. I watched as their faces changed. Shock replaced anger. My mother's eyes widened, and my father's jaw tightened. The proof was undeniable. For the first time, they could see exactly how much I had done for them, how much I had sacrificed, and how much they had relied on me without gratitude. The room went silent except for the faint rustle of the notebook pages. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth spoke louder than anything I could say. They stared at the numbers, realizing that their expectations and their anger were misplaced. They had been taking me for granted all along, assuming my generosity was endless. Now, faced with clear evidence, they had no words left to defend themselves. After a long pause, they got up to leave. There were no apologies, only a heavy mixture of shame and lingering anger. I didn't try to convince them or ask for recognition. I simply let them go. I knew that things had changed forever. The balance had shifted, and I was no longer the person they could rely on without question. As the door closed behind them, I felt a quiet sense of relief. The confrontation had not been easy, but it was necessary. The dynamic in our family had finally shifted, and for the first time, I felt like I was standing on equal ground. I didn't need their approval or their thanks. I had shown the truth, and that alone was enough. It didn't take long for the truth about Brielle's apartment to come out. I learned that she hadn't been planning to rent a place at all. She had been kicked out of her friend's apartment after pawning their electronics to get money for herself. The $3,000 she asked from me wasn't for rent. It was to cover her mistakes and keep up her careless lifestyle. Hearing this, I felt a mixture of frustration and clarity. Brielle had lied, manipulated, and taken advantage of me for years, and now the consequences had finally caught up to her. She was truly on her own, homeless and without support. Every friend she had leaned on before had turned away. The bridges she thought she could cross freely were all burned. Later that evening, my phone started ringing. Brielle's name flashed on the screen, and I felt a cold sense of finality. I knew exactly what she would say: plead, beg, or try to guilt me into sending her money. I let the phone ring, Each was a reminder of the choices I had made. I understood that helping her now would only let her continue the same cycle of irresponsibility. She needed to face the reality of her actions, just as I had finally faced mine. I watched her attempt silently. There was no anger in me anymore, only a firm resolve. I had spent years enabling her, giving her what she didn't earn, and protecting her from consequences. But now, the lesson had to come from life itself. I would not step in to save her from her mistakes because I knew it wouldn't teach her anything. As the calls and texts kept coming, I felt a strange sense of calm. Brielle's downfall was not something I wanted, but it was necessary. Her past decisions had led her here, and she had to learn the value of responsibility on her own. I had done my part in supporting her, and now it was her turn to face the results of her choices. I looked around my condo and realized how different things were for me. I had stability, security, and the ability to make my own decisions without being dragged into someone else's chaos. Brielle's failure was a mirror of what happens when someone refuses to take responsibility for their life. I felt no guilt in stepping back. I had given enough, and now it was time for her to face the truth. That night, I put my phone down and sat quietly. The sense of relief was strong, even though I knew Brielle was struggling. I understood that this was a turning point, not just for her, but for me as well. I had finally stopped being a crutch for someone who didn't deserve it, and for the first time in years, I felt completely free. One afternoon, while I was at work, I noticed someone standing hesitantly at the door. It was Brielle, but she didn't look like herself. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair messy, and there was a hollow sadness in her eyes. This wasn't the usual drama or exaggerated complaints she used to make. This was real. She had hit rock bottom, and it showed in every movement, every glance. She walked over slowly, her voice quiet and shaky. She told me that Mom and Dad had finally refused to help her. They blamed me, saying I had poisoned them by cutting off support. She had nowhere else to turn and had run out of options. Listening to her, I felt a flicker of the old instinct to step in, to help her like I always had. But I stopped myself. I had learned my lesson. Giving her money would only continue the cycle, and I wasn't going to do it again. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a piece of paper. I handed it to her without a word. On it was a list of job openings I had looked up earlier, along with some affordable roommate opportunities. I wanted her to have a real chance to stand on her own, not just a temporary fix that would disappear the moment she spent the money irresponsibly. Brielle looked at the paper with confusion at first. I could see the old frustration building, the part of her that expected me to simply hand over cash. But there was no cash, no easy solution, and that forced her to look at another path, a path that required effort and responsibility. She hesitated, staring at the list, and I could feel the weight of the situation settling in her. No one was going to rescue her this time. I had shown her that I cared, but I wasn't going to enable her. This was her moment to make choices, to face reality, and to begin building something for herself. I watched her quietly, letting her take in what I had given her. There was no lecture, no scolding, no pity, just a small push toward independence. I could tell she didn't fully understand it yet, but I hoped she would. I hoped this list would be the first step toward learning to survive and to respect the effort it took to earn a living. After a few minutes, she nodded slightly, clutching the paper like a lifeline. I didn't say anything more. I had done my part in guiding her without enabling her. The rest was up to her. Seeing her walk away, I felt a strange mix of relief and hope. For the first time, I wasn't just protecting myself. I was giving her a chance to truly change. A few days after I had given Brielle the list of job openings and affordable places to stay, my phone lit up with a message from her. I opened it and read the short, simple words. I start at the coffee shop on Monday. Thanks for the list. I stared at it for a moment, reading it again and again. No complaints, no demands, no drama, just a clear message letting me know she was finally taking a step to stand on her own. It felt strange, almost unbelievable. For years, every text or call from Brielle had been about money, favors, or guilt. Nothing had ever been straightforward or genuine. But this was different. She was reaching out without an agenda, without trying to manipulate me. It was a small crack in the wall between us, a hint that she might finally be learning responsibility. I felt a mix of emotions, relief, hope, and quiet pride. Relief because she was doing something positive, hope because this could be the start of real change, and pride because, in a small way, I had helped her reach this point. Even though I had set firm boundaries and refused to give her money, my guidance had still made a difference. I typed a short reply. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Keep it up. I didn't want to lecture her or remind her of her past mistakes. This step had to be hers. I put my phone down and leaned back in my chair, feeling a calm satisfaction. It wasn't a huge victory, and it didn't erase all the problems between us. But it was meaningful. For the first time, I felt my sister reaching out as a person, not as a source of money or someone to manipulate. It was a small, genuine connection, but it meant a lot. I could see that she was starting to understand what it meant to take responsibility and build her own life. That evening, I thought about all the years I had spent helping and protecting her, and how important it had been to step back. This message showed that setting boundaries and refusing to enable bad habits could lead to real change. The crack in the wall between us was small, but it mattered. It was proof that progress could come, even in tiny, unexpected ways. A few weeks after I had cut off the payments, I noticed a change in my parents. Mom and Dad seemed quieter, more careful with money, and less quick to ask for help. They were forced to face their own habits, realizing that they couldn't rely on me anymore for every little thing. The change was slow, but it was real. I could see them thinking before spending, checking budgets, and handling bills on their own. It was strange to watch, but also reassuring. One evening, they surprised me by inviting me to dinner at their house. They said it was their treat, and I hesitated at first. I had expected another lecture or some hidden demand, but they seemed genuinely trying to do something simple and kind. The moment I arrived, the atmosphere was awkward, but in a different way than before. There were no complaints, no guilt trips, no tension over money. For the first time in years, it felt like a meal with family rather than a negotiation where I was expected to give or fix everything. The dinner was simple, but that made it feel more honest. Mom had cooked a few dishes carefully, and Dad had set the table neatly. They didn't ask for help with bills or make subtle hints about money. Instead, we talked about small things, the weather, work, even some old memories. The conversation felt lighter than it had in years, as if the weight of expectations had been lifted. During the evening, I could sense that they were thinking about their past mistakes without saying it outright. They admitted, in small ways, that having to manage everything on their own forced them to budget, plan, and be responsible. They didn't say it directly, but the way they spoke, and the way they treated their money now, made it clear they had learned something important. I realized that being cut off had taught them a lesson they might never have learned otherwise. I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about being proud or feeling superior. It was about seeing them take responsibility for their own lives for the first time in years. They were learning to live without depending on me, and that meant our relationship could finally change. There was a new respect in the air, and I could see that they understood the value of boundaries and independence. By the end of the evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The tension and pressure I had carried for years were gone. For the first time, a family meal didn't feel like a test or a trap. I realized that change was possible, even in people who had long relied on others without thinking. This small shift in our family was a sign that boundaries and patience could bring real understanding and growth. Brielle's life changed slowly, but I could see her learning to handle things on her own. After she started her job at the coffee shop, she had to manage her life completely by herself. The apartment she rented was small and cramped, far from the comfort she was used to, but it was hers to take care of. She paid her share of the rent, bought her own groceries, and handled her bills. Every dollar mattered now, and I could see her starting to understand the value of money in a way she never had before. At first, I could tell it was hard for her. She came home tired some nights, realizing she couldn't rely on me or anyone else to fix her problems. But slowly, she began to take pride in her work and in keeping her apartment running. She was learning independence, and I watched it quietly, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. This was different from before, when I had always given her a way out. Now, she was facing consequences and shaping her own future. At the same time, my own life was changing. Without Brielle constantly asking for money and my parents pressuring me to cover their bills, I could finally focus on myself. I saved more money than I ever had before, and my condo felt calmer and lighter. My phone wasn't a source of stress, filled with constant demands. I could finally enjoy the peace I had worked so hard for, and it felt amazing. I began thinking more about my own goals and planning for the future. The money I used to give away so easily was now working for me. I could invest in my future, save for emergencies, and even treat myself without feeling guilty. The peace and security I felt were empowering. I realized I was finally living for myself, and no longer carrying the weight of other people's mistakes. Over time, I noticed real changes in both of us. Brielle, though still learning, was becoming responsible and independent. And I was stronger, calmer, and more focused on my own life. I felt proud of myself for finally setting boundaries and standing up for what I deserved. Watching her struggle and grow made me realize that stepping back had been the right choice. For the first time in years, I felt free, secure, and in control of my life, knowing that both of us were learning to live on our own terms. I sat in my condo one quiet morning, sipping my coffee and letting the sunlight spill across the room. I thought back over everything that had happened. The years of being taken for granted, the endless requests, the drama, and the constant pressure to provide. At first, cutting off my family felt harsh, but now I could see the truth. The choice I made wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about forcing them to stand on their own, to face their own responsibilities and grow. That was the real point of it all. Watching Brielle slowly change gave me a strange mix of pride and relief. She was learning to take care of herself, to earn her own money, and to respect the effort it took to survive. I could see it in the way she managed her apartment, in the way she went to work without complaining, and in the little messages she sent me that were no longer full of demands. Seeing her gain self-respect, even in small steps, felt like a reward for my patience and persistence. I realized that helping her grow without giving her an easy way out was more powerful than anything I could have done with money. My parents were different too. They were learning to manage their own lives, making decisions carefully, and finally taking responsibility for their actions. They had been forced to change because I refused to keep bailing them out. Their independence wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was more satisfying than any argument or lecture I could have given them. It was proof that boundaries and tough choices could lead to growth, even in people who had relied on me for years. As I looked around my condo, I felt a deep sense of peace. The noise, the stress, and the constant demands were gone. I could enjoy my mornings without fear of calls, messages, or complaints. My money was secure, my space was calm, and I finally had the freedom to focus on myself. It was the first time in a long while that I truly felt in control of my life. The sweetest part of this journey wasn't revenge in the usual sense. I didn't need to punish anyone or burn bridges. The real victory came from building my own fortress, creating my own life, and watching my family learn to manage theirs. They were no longer dependent on me, and I was no longer weighed down by their mistakes. I had given them the chance to grow, and they were taking it. Sitting there, I realized that this was the ultimate payoff. I had learned the power of boundaries, patience, and letting people face their own consequences. I smiled softly, feeling a calm confidence that I had never known before. The best revenge had been creating my own life and letting everyone else learn to build theirs. For the first time, everything felt right, and the peace I felt was more satisfying than I could have imagined. Do you think I made the right choice by standing up for myself and cutting off my family, or should I have kept helping them? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories.